Thank you so much, Lisa, and welcome everybody to the She Is Me conference. I'm so excited to be here because I just love the idea of hearing people's stories that I can relate to and things that I can really connect with, in my heart. I think it's so important. And to tell you about my story, it's like pretty much everybody else's story. It's about change, how change happens and the choices that we make, and how those changes affect who we are today, in this moment, and in the next moment. You see, we all experience different types of motivation to make change. Sometimes we do things based on what we're supposed to do, sometimes on what people tell us we have to do or require us to do. Sometimes it's to keep unity in the family or comply with the rules of society and business. The shoulds, the gottas, maybe even the wannas sometimes. I grew up in rural Wisconsin, very rural. So, of course, all of us kids had chores to do. And because my parents owned a resort, there was a lot of interacting with the guests, entertaining their kids, keeping the property shipshape, working in the stream, mowing a lot of lawn. We were raised in a mindset of service. And I honestly think I can safely say that my siblings would agree that we were pretty resentful that the guests came first above family and our friends. We were taught to work hard and that a good work ethic was incredibly important. And we had that. And I'm grateful for that because it allowed me to push through the challenges and get stuff done, to be productive. But when you're growing up in the backwoods of northern Wisconsin, that also meant we weren't exposed to a lot of different ways of thinking. Meditation was something that hippies did. Peace and love was somebody else. It wasn't us. We had work to do. People of color simply weren't there. Basically, we were all Europeans, at least in our hearts. There was a pair of older women who lived together, but we all just said they were sisters. These very traditional values and way of living was the only thing I knew. And I made a lot of decisions based on those values with very little exposure to any other way of looking at things. So let's just say that when I left home to go to vet school, my viewpoints were limited. I was hungry to see the world, to learn new things. Like many college students, I did some wild and crazy partying, a lot of things that were just plain stupid, but that is how we learn, isn't it? I've had a bizarre set of careers in my life. At first, I kind of took whatever job I could find, but at the time, I began to follow my instincts. And that kept life interesting, full of learning opportunities. Well, some of them were different. I worked as a meat packer. I worked in a Motorola factory. I packed corn, I picked beans, I was a telephone operator, a dog catcher, I worked in retail. And then I dropped out of school to work on a horse ranch, and I became a horse trainer. And after that, I became a pastry chef, a line cook, dishwasher, waitress, sous chef, executive chef. And then one day, I turned to technology, and I started an internet startup. I even got a couple of rounds of venture funding, and then the dot-com crash happened. And we converted that business, several times into e-learning, digital marketing. Then we started creating social media strategies for companies that ranged from small businesses and nonprofits to Fortune 50 companies. Now, I went through a lot of change, and I wouldn't change any of the jobs that I had because I learned something from them. Even the ones that I really hated, they taught me something. Working for my parents taught me to have a good work ethic and to be loyal, to just sometimes do the work and not whine about it, and to be of service whenever I could. That service mentality carried through most of my future work life, and it taught me to engage people from a how can I help standpoint. As I started working with all these businesses and individuals running their own businesses, I saw how they were struggling, managing their employees, dealing with their own stress, this new world of digital everything that people just weren't used to. Whether they were solo entrepreneurs trying to get their start off the ground, running mega companies, people were all experiencing similar things: self-doubt, wondering what was going to be next for them. And they wanted to talk. They had a lot of questions. And having that "how can I help" mindset enabled me to work with them as a coach and to learn a lot of other aspects of their businesses. So that got me ready for the next phase of my life. Up until that time, I really hadn't struggled much at all. I just kind of rolled with whatever came. I did the work. When something new came up, I jumped on it and I moved to that. Yeah, there were hard times, and yes, there were divorces, failed jobs, bad spots, down days. But overall, it wasn't bad at all. One day, I met an amazing, fabulous, talented, beautiful woman who swept me off my feet. My whole life changed. It wasn't all that long that, kind of like these things go, we moved in together. We left San Francisco, we bought a house in San Jose, and began to raise a family together. And right about then, at the height of our bliss, she was diagnosed with cancer. I'm not going to go deep into that detail because honestly, it's not really my story to tell. I can just say that everything about the process of beating cancer is harrowing. It's exhausting. You never know when something new is going to happen. You got a lot to learn about fast, and you absolutely, positively must be able to know enough to advocate yourself through the system. I call this our life hits the fan moment. I even did a TEDx talk about it. You can look it up. But for me, for us, everything had changed and we were exhausted, like all the time, exhausted. And it took me way too long to realize that I couldn't keep up the pace that I was working at, that I was spinning my wheels on a lot of things and dropping balls because I was too busy, too tired, and trying not to think too much. I was doing a lot of other things that didn't help me at all. Drinking, overeating, binging on streaming TV, driving around aimlessly in the middle of the day just to kind of clear my head and get some space. I knew I had to find a way to take care of myself so I could be a better caregiver, partner, mom. I stumbled on a weekend mindfulness retreat, and my partner encouraged me to make the time and go. What I learned in that retreat, it got me unstuck. I realized that, like me, a lot of people were searching for a way to soothe their souls, to find a way to be less reactive, better able to handle, well, everything. I got really excited about this idea of mindfulness and emotional intelligence and what I could learn from it and how it could help me and how it could help others. So I started studying. I learned from some amazing teachers at some universities and some private enterprises, a whole bunch of places. The more I learned, the happier I was. And as I started to talk to more people who were caring for loved ones, I realized that I could help them too come to the same realizations, that it's possible to get through this, that it's possible to be resilient, to manage life in tiny moments instead of taking it on all at once, trying to do too much, too fast, too often, burning ourselves out when it isn't really necessary to do that. When you're in that moment, you feel like, I have to do everything now. I have to fix everything now. I have to carry all the balls myself. That is very rarely true. There are lots of ways that you can manage this differently. And there are people that can help you if you let them. And sometimes, when we have that fixer mentality, we try to do it all ourselves. But that really isn't the best way. Trust me, it is not the best way. So I developed ways to manage. I even wrote a book called When Life Hits the Fan, so people could learn some of these skills to better care for themselves. This was a very long struggle for our family. Today, my beautiful, resilient wife is strong, successful, and still mine. We're both reasonably happy. Even in a pandemic, we've managed to maintain our joy in life and adapt our businesses to keep moving forward, to adjust as things happen. We've all been through this incredible time, and it's stressed us out a lot. It's caused us intense amounts of pain across the board. Whether we believe in vaccines or not is irrelevant. We've all been impacted by this. And the more it went on, the more I was able to focus on learning, on educating myself, on expanding my reach to people through virtual means, doing virtual retreats and classes and coaching, things like that, that really helped me to connect more deeply with what it is right in here in my heart, to bring compassion, to bring kindness, to help people deal with whatever's going on with them. So it took me more than 50 years to find my true purpose, my calling, the one that makes my heart full and my life rich and satisfying. It doesn't mean that I don't have challenges. It doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, so peaceful all the time. But what I've learned is how to be peaceful more of the time, how to be calm more of the time, how to be able to adapt and be resilient. Because life is going to hit the fan. It's going to do it again. If we look at our lives, we know that there have been times that are really challenging and times that weren't. And there's those little times in between where everything's fine. And we want more of those. Not those moments where we're like, okay, when's the next shoe going to drop? Whatever that means to you. If we're mindful, we can really start to bring focus into this present moment. It can be something as simple as a pause, taking a breath, and allowing ourselves to just be right here in this moment, right now. One of the biggest challenges with something like a major illness is that we're thinking about the future or we're thinking about the past all the time. And we're not in this moment. We're not recognizing that in this moment, right now, there is no crisis. We're not anticipating a crisis. It's okay. And that, I think, is one of the biggest things I learned from this, is that there are times that we are okay. Even when we're dealing with something really painful, we notice that if we're paying attention, that the pain doesn't exist all the time. It comes and goes. Our struggles come and go. And if we can just acknowledge that in this moment, we are safe. It is not the future. It is not anything that happened in the past. It's just now. And that really changes things. So I shut down the marketing agency. I changed everything in my life. And I founded a new business, and I call it Nearly Mindful. Because really, that's all we are. We're just nearly mindful. There are very few people who are mindful all the time. And for me, it's more about those moments when we recognize that we are mindful. Being nearly mindful is enough. We don't have to take all day. It doesn't have to be a big deal. We just need to recognize those moments when we are mindful. And also to recognize the times that we're not mindful, that we're not present, that we're distracted, that we're multitasking, trying to do too much in too little time, trying to answer our email while we're on a phone call. Can you ever remember a time when you really didn't know what you just said on the phone because you were actually answering an email? That multitasking really isn't helping us get more done. It's more interrupting us getting things done. So learning to microtask, to monotask, just do one thing at a time. Do it fully, do it completely, do it to the best of your ability, and then do the other thing. That's one thing that you certainly learn when you're dealing with a crisis situation, that you need that time to focus and be present. We need to recognize when we're not really paying attention, we're not listening fully, or just that we don't know how we got to our destination. We got in the car, we drove there, but did we pass that street or that street? It happens all the time. And I'm not saying that you have to be fully present all the time, because you really don't. Very few people can be. Just recognize, oh, I'm not paying attention right now. What was I thinking about? What was I talking about? When you recognize that you're not paying attention, that's time to celebrate. That's a mindful moment right there. Oh, I'm not paying attention. Okay. Now I can make a choice. Now I can do something differently. Now I can make a change. So as I studied, I began to learn more about things like behavior design, positive neuroplasticity, where you can actually change how your brain reacts to things, where you can take things that you used to respond to negatively and change the way you respond to them so that you don't have to stick in those same old patterns. When we combine those two things, positive neuroplasticity and behavior design, we can actually change the way our processes work. We can actually change how we do things over time. And, those things that we say, oh, that's the way I do it, or I'm not good at math, you don't have to be stuck in that place. You can change your mindset. You can set your mind to what you want. So I learned all these things. I learned about emotional intelligence and positive psychology. And the more I talked to people, the more I got engaged with people, the more I realized that sense of how can I help, that service mindset was something that I'd carried through from my childhood for many, many years. And it had served me well. But now I really found my true purpose in life. And it is to help people to reach their goals, to help people realize that when they think, I can't handle this, yeah, you can handle it. You'll get through this. But in order to do that, you need to be able to recognize when you're catastrophizing, when you're not paying attention, when you're not listening, when things are overwhelming. You need to be able to find a way to give yourself a break, to be able to simply take that pause, allow that moment, just that moment for a pause. The pause is an incredibly powerful thing. It can help us to settle. It can help us to move on to something else. It can help us to see that we're stuck, or that we are fixated on something, or that we're not actually looking at the world from an open-minded perspective. Back in the days when I had a very narrow mindset, I had no idea the richness that the world offered, the richness that other people offered me, other cultures. And now I get to bask in that. I get to enjoy it. And I get to explore those things to understand a little bit more about other people's perspectives and how the world works. And when we allow those perspectives to come into our lives, it really does make an amazing difference. So I started doing workshops and lunch and learns in companies. I started hosting retreats that drew in people who also wanted to find a way to manage stress in their lives and find that grounding, that sense of calm. Some wanted to learn to meditate. Others thought that was too much work. And that's okay. The whole point is to recognize that these are simply tools. These tools can allow us to be happier, to be more resilient, to find our joy again. Even in the pandemic, there are sources of that quiet comfort, of joy, of gratitude. And when we find that joy again, we can live with purpose. We can care for those we love without depleting ourselves, without wearing ourselves out. And you know what? I know now, after more than 15, almost 20 years, how to recognize what I need in this moment. And I have tools to take care of myself and those I care about. And I've shared that with so many people. And I find it just incredibly fulfilling to hear from them that these tools work for them too. It isn't something that you have to do everything in the toolkit. You find what works for you. You can learn how to make those tiny moments of mindfulness matter. To see those things that you need to let go of, those thoughts that you need to let go of, those old things that you learned in your childhood that you're still carrying around with you that you really don't need anymore. You can also find what you need to hold close to your heart, how to communicate with others with clarity and confidence, how being able to communicate is such a powerful thing. I work with a lot of people who feel like they're communicating, but what they're doing really is telling. And as they learn to communicate through listening, as they learn to be better collaborators, it really changes the way that they work. And especially if you're in any kind of a leadership situation, being able to have a little empathy and compassion for those you're talking to get back, step back from that ego of, I know everything, you just need to do what you're supposed to do. That method doesn't work so much anymore. We need to know how to talk to people, to communicate better, mindfully, with emotional intelligence that helps us to be able to make smarter choices, to bring that clarity to communication, especially when it's a difficult conversation. How to make smarter choices. And always to be more resilient, to be able to handle things when they get thrown at us. The day-to-day, as well as the life hits the fan moments. So here we are in an absolutely amazing time, full of disruption, full of innovation, full of change and opportunity, full of time, in many cases, to rethink how we live our lives, to rethink how we want to live our lives. Right now, we're looking at unheard of job opportunities because people are wanting different things than they did before the pandemic or the election or whatever. The last few years have been hard, and a lot of people are making changes. They're leaving their jobs. They're moving across the country because they can work remote. They want fulfillment, and they're not wanting to spend all their time commuting to jobs they hate. People are reinventing themselves. They're reinventing the way that we work. This is a revolution happening right now in our world. And it's not just this country, it's around the world. And in many ways, as much as it's hard to say, we have a pandemic to be grateful for because it forced us to step back. It forced us to get a little more internal, a little more in our hearts, to see what we need, to see what we like, what we don't like, to recognize what it's like to be with friends and family or to miss seeing friends and family, to see the struggling around the world in so many different ways and want to find ways to reach out with compassion, to lift up. We have an opportunity here to change the way we go forward, to be happier, to be really successful. And when I say successful, I don't mean buying a Ferrari. I mean defining success for ourselves, defining success in a way that fills our hearts, makes us want to do it forever. When I work with people to understand that we can use mindfulness as a tool to enrich our lives, they don't even believe it until they see it. I call this microdosed mindfulness, taking a small drop here and there of mindfulness, paying attention, rather than trying to be mindful in everything. This is much more approachable, easy to just do and get on with living. These tiny moments can give us peace or gratitude, appreciation for the world and those around us. And you only need a few moments of mindfulness to change the way things happen. Pausing before you speak, learning to really listen or to communicate more clearly and effectively, to really see what you need and what others need. Realizing how often you say no when you mean yes, how often you say yes when you mean no. When we're fully present, mindful to what is, we make better decisions, have fewer regrets, more successes and love and joy and peace. Think about what it is that your dreams are and how those dreams could come true. Even a dream that you think is completely impossible. To dream that you could be happy to find the love of your life, create your own job, your own way of working, your own company, your own situation. All of those things are in your control right now. The trick is to be resilient, to be open-minded about what's coming up for you, to stop doubting and denying and start choosing, to start listening to your heart. When we adopt a mindful approach to life, we see things we're missing up until now, and we can begin to see a path open to get there. So, how can I help you? What really fills my heart is helping you find your own path to what fills yours. Reach out to me through my email address or through social media. I'm Fouts pretty much everywhere. You'll find a lot of tips on mindful living, info about my books and events. I've got a new book coming up called Microdosed Mindfulness sometime this fall. You can download free resources or events through my website. Find out what's there. And think to yourself, what do I need? And how can I help you?